Drive Me Wild by Elizabeth Harbison. H-A-R-B Harbison. Harbison? Ugh. Why do I always try to say their names? Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm bringing you the second update for my Read With Me series. Just a reminder, this series is where I go through the books that I have been reading. I'm currently working on 2 reading challenges. Well, technically 3 if you include my Goodreads reading challenge. But I'm working on the Pan Your TBR Bookshelf, created by Amy at Curly Loves Books and Beauty, as well as the Colour Me Reading Challenge, created by myself and Samantha. I'll have all of us down below, as well as everyone else who has joined in. In addition to that, I am aiming to get through 24 books in 2023. And I will say that so far I'm doing quite well on this challenge. I've managed to read 8 books since my last update. All of these, except for one, were actually audiobooks, which did make it a bit easier to get through. But let's jump straight into the books and which challenges they were towards, if they were towards a challenge at all. The first book I managed to get through is the only physical book I've read since the last update. This is Drive Me Wild by Elizabeth Harbison, and it is a Mills and Boon style book. I did enjoy it. It is about a divorcee who heads back to her hometown with her young son to try to get back on her feet after a bit of a nasty divorce. She needs a job and she pushes to get a job as a bus driver. There is a guy from her past that they do have some residual sparks, and basically things go from there. There is a little bit of relationship drama, as you could expect from a Mills and Boon book, but it's mostly just caused by miscommunication and the fact that Grace does have a plan to leave town as soon as she has a little bit of a dosh behind her. Essentially, stuff and things happen, and the ending is rather predictable for a Mills and Boon. I will say I have read a couple of Mills and Boon in my time, and this one, its spice level is probably a little bit more than some of the other ones I have read. But overall, it is just a quick, easy, happy ending style book. If that sounds like your cup of tea, I would give this one a read. And this one goes both towards my Colour Me reading challenge for the colour Scarlet, as you can see from the cover, and also my hashtag Pan Your TBR Bookshelf, as this is a book that I personally own. Moving on to the next one. Next we have In a Badger Way, which is the second book in the Honey Badger Chronicles by Shelley Lawrenston. We continue to follow the 3 sisters, the McKilligan sisters, but this one focuses a lot more on the younger sister, Stevie. It is her venture into love and self-discovery. Also, I think self-esteem, it has a lot to do with that as well. This book especially touches a lot on mental health and self-care. Stevie has got some personality disorders and does take medication for it. And I think the fact that Stevie's transformed, shifted creature is this real monstrosity, this monstrous beast that people are terrified of and she does not seem to control, is really, I guess, in a roundabout way, an analogy for a personality disorder. I think the big thing that's kind of spoken about as well is the concept of not about getting rid of it or removing parts of yourself, whether they are something that you can control and are pleasant, but to get to that point where you accept it and are able to work with it. But other than that, the story is also a love story. Stevie has a bit of a strange relationship with her friend's bodyguard. His name is Shen, and in the end, she kind of decides that they're dating, and he isn't all on board with that at first, but they kind of have this enemies to lovers, but they're not really enemies, but maybe like frenemies to lovers type story going on. But their relationship is super sweet, and I really enjoyed the coming together of them both. From my understanding, this series, The Badger Chronicles, are a small spin-off series that's part of a larger world created by Shelley, but I actually haven't read any of the other books in the larger series. I have read on Goodreads that readers who have read both feel that if you hadn't read the originals, you wouldn't really understand a lot of the characters that are coming and going within the story. Because though there are the main characters, there are a lot of outside characters that come and go and have these sneak peeks throughout the story. Overall though, even with my lack of prior knowledge, I found the story quite enjoyable, and I didn't even mind the side characters that come and went, because you did kind of get a bit of an understanding about who they were and what their role was within the story without having read the previous stories. Obviously, in saying that, if I had read the other series, I would most likely have a deeper appreciation for those characters and maybe a deeper understanding of their wants and needs, and also maybe worry for when things were happening that wasn't necessarily pleasant for them, where I found myself a lot more invested in just the main characters of this series. This book also does have a bit of spice in it, so if that isn't really for you, you could probably just skip those parts of the story and still get a lot out of it, or you could possibly just give it a miss altogether. Out of the two Honey Badger Chronicle books I've read so far, I did enjoy this one a lot more than the first one, and I'm definitely going to be reading the third one in this series. So if you haven't guessed from the cover, this book does count towards my Colour Me Reading challenge for the colour orange. The next book I read was by Brian Tracy, and it is called Eat That Frog. I will admit that I didn't really enjoy this one. I gave it a low star rating on Goodreads, and I found it to be a little bit, I'm not going to say patronizing, but the way, the techniques it kind of gives you to beating procrastination are essentially boiled down to just eat that frog. Pick the biggest frog and eat that frog first. So essentially break down the activities that you have to get done and pick the most important one, prioritize, pick the most important one and eat that frog first, get that job done first. It also does talk about in it about deciding in your job role what is actually the core components of what your job should be and only doing those components. Essentially going to your boss and saying, I think that this is what the core components of my job role is. I can give you more out of my job, more out of my time. I will achieve more if I only focus on these things, and we give everything else, all the little stuff, on to somebody else. I don't necessarily agree with what is being said there, but if everybody is giving the less important stuff all to somebody else, you either are going to need to hire someone to purely do the less important stuff, or nobody will do the less important stuff. Because the thing is, with that less important stuff, from my experience, it maybe isn't so important that it is the main core component of your job, but sometimes they are important enough that they do keep the business running and going on. So I don't know if a lot of the advice that Brian provided within this book actually suited me. I did like some of the little tidbits, and I might try to incorporate that into my everyday life. But overall, out of the organizational books, self-help style books, leadership books that I have been reading, this one was not my favorite. Especially because just often enough the answer was, eat that frog, just get the job done. If I could just eat that frog and get the job done, I probably would not be reading a book called Eat That Frog. Just saying. With that said, this book does not go towards any of my challenges, and overall it is not a book that I would overly recommend. On the opposite end of the scale, I would recommend Get Your Shit Together by Sarah Knight. This book was really good. So the concept of this book is all about getting your shit together. It's about making sure that you're organized and that you have a goal and a path that you're working towards. She talks a lot about not just jumping into things without thinking, but planning and making decisions that are smart for yourself that can get you places. One of the big things that she refers to in the book is her decision, her and her husband's decision really, to quit her job in editing as an editor and move to an island, live on the beach and work from home. That is a huge decision to make, but she didn't just jump into doing it. She didn't just one day go, I had enough, and quit everything and move to the seaside, move to, the islands. No, she actually planned out how much money she would need, what she would need to get there, what type of job she would need to have, and start working towards it slowly, ticking things off as you go until she was able to make that move, and with a plan of a year down the track. So the book itself is a lot about goal setting. Sarah actually has a number of other books on similar topics, on that self-help, getting through life, making decisions type topics, and I'm definitely going to read more of them. Overall, I loved Sarah's writing style. She very much has a who cares attitude, and if you don't mind a little bit of colorful language with your dash of self-help, I would definitely say this is the book for you. I listened to this via audiobook and I found it an even better experience, I think, because Sarah herself was the narrator. So I would definitely recommend giving it a go as an audiobook. But overall, I really enjoyed this book and would recommend giving it a go. The next book I read was Organizing for the Rest of Us by Dana K. White. For anyone who has recently seen my wardrobe decluttering video, I mentioned Dana in there. I really love Dana's books. I love the way that she herself is a recovering hoarder. She doesn't call it that. She calls it a recovering slob, reform slob, something like that. But she had too much stuff and struggled with a lot of the things that I personally struggle with when it comes to organizing and decluttering. And I find that I connect with her lived experiences. Organizing for the Rest of Us provides 100 tips, 100 go-tos on how to declutter. And I have definitely started to incorporate those into some of my decluttering adventures. I especially like her container concept. It takes away the emotion that sometimes can plague my decluttering experience. So if you struggle with stuff and decluttering, I would definitely recommend giving some of Dana K. White's books a read. And I would also include this one in that list because I really enjoyed the little pocket-sized way that the book covered quite a lot of stuff, not in huge depths, but just enough to get you started on that journey. And if you wanted to go further into some of her other writings, you can. So organizing for the rest of us was a part of my Color Me Reading challenge, and it covered the color sky blue. The next book I read is Things No One Will Tell Fat Girls by Jess Baker, who is the blogger The Militant Baker. And I will tell you, it actually took me a majority of the book to realize that though she is actually a baker, Baker is also her last name. Mind blown. This book basically takes all of Jess's life experiences and puts it on paper. What it is like to be a fat girl and what people no longer tell you. As part of the book, she has these fat girls do all the things challenges, and some of them are so ridiculous. It's stuff like swing on a swing. And it is crazy to think that some of those things on the list, people do not consider if you are overweight that you can do. Overall, I did enjoy this book. This is a non-fiction book, and it does cover both Jess's life and her learned experiences since becoming body positive. The sections that really got me, the ones about her and her boyfriend, where he is stereotypically society's idea of an attractive male, and the kind of hate that she's experienced and that he has unfortunately experienced as well with being in a cross-weight style relationship. The other section I really got into was when she was talking about even overweight fat people having this, the plus size model look, which is very proportioned even though it is considered larger. And especially the bit where she talked about most plus size models not being more than a size 16, which is crazy because I'm more than a size 16, and I think there are people who are similar size and bigger than me who are not getting represented within that plus size area. And also there are people with different body shapes that are not getting represented. I will say overall, my favorite part is the fact that being supportive of one size, being body positive for larger people, does not mean that you need to go out and hate anyone that is not within that space. So even though you're saying, yeah, I'm chubs, but it's great and I love my body for what it is, you don't need to go and say things, those campaigns like real men like curves. That is unnecessary hate. To push somebody up does not mean that you need to pull somebody down. And I would say that unfortunately everybody, probably even myself, have been known to do that at some point in their lives, in their existence on this planet. I really enjoyed Jess's writing style. I did also listen to this one via audiobook, and it was narrated by Jess herself. I think overall there was a couple times in the audiobook where she paraphrases, where she directly quotes other people and authors, and a couple times, because of the fact that it's narrated and not written on page, I actually didn't realize at first that that's what she was doing. But once I had an understanding of that, it made the rest of the context make sense. This book also did not cover any of my challenges, as did the next two. The last two, they also did not cover any of my challenges. So jumping back into the world of spicy fantasy, I actually read the 6th book in the Dragon Lords of Valdir series. This is Paul's Pursuit. It's by S.E. Smith. And anyone who remembers me talking about the first one, I think it's Abducting Abby, I'll have a link up here in the cards, my discussion about that book. I don't love the series, But I enjoy it enough that it has me caught. It is a really odd series. It's about these dragon shifters from Valdia. They're aliens, and there's these brothers, and they come down. One of them has a crash on Earth in the first book, and he meets this Earth woman, falls in love, and he abducts her away to his world, and stuff ensues, and they all get a man, and it's all wonderful. Terrible things are happening, babies, lots of spice, everything nice. This book is actually a bit of a swap on the other ones. So the first 5 books all dealt with the 5 brothers and them meeting their women, their Earth women. And I think a lot of the book is they deal with this idea that Valdia men have this really strong idea of what women should be, meek and quiet and baby making. And then these Earth women who they meet and fall for are the complete opposite. They really pushes this idea at first, I think, that women are strong and independent and they ain't just gonna do what you want them to do because they don't need no man. This one swaps the story over, and you have Paul, who is Trisha's father. Trisha goes back to Earth and brings him back, gets him to join them, tells him what's up, and he decides to join them on Valdia. The boys have their mother. Her name is Maureen Rykill. She is widowed and has never found her true mate. If you know where this story is going, she finds her true mate in Paul. I will say, overall, I enjoyed the story quite a lot. They really encouraged this idea on some levels for their high priestess, who is Maureen of the symbionts, to become that warrior that she's always wanted to be. But there are a few comments where I feel like that S.E. Smith forgets Paul's character. So Paul trained his daughter Trisha to be a killer, essentially. He trains her, his job was training Marines, and he teaches her a lot about guerrilla warfare. They play a game called tag quite a lot, and he gets her quite often to help with these training of these Marines, and she is really one of the best warriors that you can imagine. And she very often outsmarts Marines, Valdia, all of the above. So in saying that, you quite clearly get this idea that Paul believes that women can be strong. In fact, he teaches his daughter to be strong. So then when there's this scenario where some bad guys come to Valdia and they are trying to steal the little Valdia babies, and one of the bad guys is a woman, and Paul, in his head, his stream of consciousness, it has a thought, I guess, that says that he wouldn't hit her because she's a woman and women are meant to be soft, and which is very much like a comment that the Valdia warriors would have said. But I was a little bit drawn back and pulled out of the story by having Paul say that, especially because he himself has taught his daughter to be a warrior and comments on the fact that people are not expecting it. So why would you then not expect other women to also be warriors? And if you think only you are smart enough to teach your daughter to be a warrior, and only your daughter is good enough to be a warrior, which he obviously doesn't because he knows the other women and believes that they are all warriors. But if that was the case, then your ego is too big for this world. No wonder you had to go to Valdia. Overall, with that all said, I actually enjoyed the book. It felt like a nice conclusion to the rest of the series. But this series does go on. There is a 7th book. I don't know if there's any more than that as of yet, but I do know there is a 7th book and it's called Twin Dragons, and I do want to read it. Like I said, it does have quite a lot of spice in it. It has quite a lot of drama in it. It is a kill or be killed type of story. There is symbiotes, there is dragons, there is aliens, there's death, there's love. It is quite a crazy world. The writing itself is not the best writing I've ever read, but it does have me hooked. It is ridiculous, to be honest. It is a really ridiculous story, and some of the things that happen, you just think, even in an alien world, how is that possible? But overall, it's a good time. It's a fun read. So if you are interested in a bit of erotica, some spicy spice crossed with dragon shifters and aliens and war and warriors and strong independent women who ain't taking none of your crap, then that is probably a series for you. Like I said, this book did not go towards any of my challenges, but I did enjoy the ride. The last book I managed to get through was Let It Go by Peter Walsh. This is a book similar to an organizational book and a decluttering book, but is very much about downsizing. So it kind of gives you a plan for how to go about downsizing, whether you are downsizing for yourself or downsizing for somebody else. It talks a lot about the emotion of downsizing rather than the actual how to, like what to keep, what not to keep. It gives you ideas of what you should and shouldn't do, but they are very broad. It is a scenario of if you like it, if you want to keep it, keep it. But remember that your space is limited, hence container concept, heading back to Dana K. White. So you might not be able to keep something else. And it does talk about not paying the money to move things that you won't want once you get there. Take the time now to plan your downsizing project. Downsizing in this concept also really focuses on the idea of moving to a smaller house. Even actually at some point moving to a larger house, but such a long distance away that downsizing is a smart option. This book also has little real life experiences put in there from people who have been downsizing in real life. And overall, I really enjoyed this book. I am going through, I guess, a downsizing project. I would like to have less stuff as I have a bit of a hoarder and have overloaded myself. So for that, I did enjoy it, because some of the tidbits were worthwhile, but it does very much focus on a start and an end to downsizing, where I need something that is a bit more of a continual declutter process. But to get a head start on downsizing, I would recommend this book. Or if you are moving or a family member is moving, especially to a smaller location, or if, for example, if you have a family member moving into assisted living, this is a book for you. It also touches a lot on once a family member has passed on how, or is moving into assisted living, and how you as a family can do a downsizing project if you are needing to do it with lots of people involved, and essentially how to go about doing it without destroying your family bonds, because the emotions are already running high and sometimes you just gotta let it go, both figuratively and physically. Just a reminder, this book does not cover any of my challenges, but I did enjoy the read. So far, I guess a bit of an overall recap of where I am with my challenges. So since January, I have read 12 books, with only one going towards my hashtag Pan Your TBR Bookshelf, and 6 of them going towards my Colour Me Reading challenge. I've got a bit of a ways to go for both my Colour Me Reading challenge and my pan your TBR bookshelf. Actually, a bit of a ways is an understatement. I have many of a ways to go towards I will finish my pan your TBR bookshelf. And I think that I need to pull back and start reading books that I own. I guess the hardest part of that is, like I said, only one of the books I read since my last update was physical. Otherwise, all the other books I've read are audiobooks. There is no problem with that in any real sense because audiobooks are still books. There is no difference. But obviously, the books on my TBR bookshelf are physical books. I physically own all these books. So if I'm only listening to audiobooks, I'm not actually reading the physical book. I have touched on the idea of borrowing the audiobook of the physical book I have, but at the same time, so that I can tick it off the list of having not read it. But at the same time, I figure if I was going to do that, why the hell do I own the book in the first place? So I'm hesitant to take that step. I'm not really sure how I'm going to go about pushing myself to get my TBR bookshelf completed, and I'm definitely not going to be getting through it this year, but we will work on it one step at a time. In relation to my Colour Me Reading challenge, I think I'm going to start actually considering whether a colour meets my theme when I pick the book, rather than just reading free style and then going, oh, let me look what books they are. Do they match any of the colors? I probably could have made some of the books that I read that I haven't counted towards either challenge match one of the colors, but I really wanted it to be obvious that that was the color. I kind of wanted to have more thought into it than what I did, rather than just making it fit a color, if you know what I mean. So that is currently where I am at. If you have read any of the books I've read, please let me know down in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Or if you'd like to join me on either of these challenges, please also let me know down in the comments. But until next time, I'm Verity. This is the second update in my Read With Me series 2023. And now to the outro.